Okay, that sounds better. Good evening and welcome to the St. Louis Zoo. I'm Louise Bradshaw. I'm the Director of Education here at the zoo, and it's so great to see you all here for our very first Science Seminar Series lecture for this year. Typically, I welcome you and then give you some ideas of some of the conservation conversations, the more zoo-related conservation lectures that we have going on. We're in the process of establishing some final dates on some of those. So what I'm going to do is just kind of tease you with a few of the topics that are coming our way this year. We're going to have a really interesting speaker talk about Ethiopian wolves. Who knew? Wolves in Ethiopia. But it's a very fascinating project, and one of our, it's a partner with one of our Wild Care Institute, the zoo's signature field conservation programs. We'll also have a speaker who has worked on tortoises in the Galapagos and box turtles in Forest Park. Again, an interesting connection. How does that work? You have to come and find out. We are also working on pulling together a panel of speakers who are very interested in talking about the science behind climate change. And this is all part of public understanding of climate change. We've all experienced a very interesting summer, and I think it's led to a lot of questions in people's minds. So this will be a great opportunity to meet with some of the experts and find out more. We have speakers who will be speaking about, let's see, and also one of our field conservation programs that focuses on Humboldt penguins in Peru, and then also working with desert antelope in the Sahara Sahel. So those are just some of the topics. There'll be a lot more, and the best way to make sure you get the information on those is to make sure you're on the Academy of Sciences email list. Rose has clipboards she'll be passing around. If you're not sure if you're on the list, you can sign up. If you are, you probably got an email about this lecture tonight, but if you didn't, please sign up, and we love to make sure to see you and have you come. But again, thank you all for coming, and next I'd like to introduce Rose Jansen from the Academy of Science of St. Louis.
Good evening. As Louise said, my name is Rose Jansen. I'm with the Academy of Science St. Louis. If you're not familiar with us, we are a local nonprofit. We've been around for over 150 years, and it's our mission to promote the public understanding of science. We do that through a number of public science seminars, field trips, and tours at venues that celebrate science throughout the region. And as Louise mentioned, if you'd like to find out more about us, feel free to sign up on our e-news clipboard, a list that will go around the audience this evening, and we'll make sure that you get information on upcoming events and programs of the Academy of Science. If you are a student who's here tonight and you need to verify attendance, you can come see me after the question and answer session. And I don't have stickers for you, but I'll give you a card or something along those lines. And again, you can find more information on the Academy and our community-wide events, public talks, and programs on our website at academyofsciencestl.org, or sign up on our e-news sign-up sheet, and we'll make sure that you get that information. There's a little bit of information at the visitor's desk outside this evening. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, I do want to mention a couple upcoming events that you might have an interest in attending. On Friday, September 7th and Saturday, September 8th, right here in Forest Park, the Academy is hosting a BioBlitz. BioBlitz is an Academy citizen science initiative and a flash exploration of the park's biodiversity. So families with nature lovers, budding scientists, experienced naturalists of all ages and from all walks of life are invited to participate. Those students under the age of 18 must attend with an adult. You'll join teams of scientists and skilled naturalists to explore and inventory the park's plant and animal life. Expeditions leave every hour from the base camp located behind the Dennis and Judith Jones Visitor and Education Center. You do need to register to attend, and you can find more information on times and open teams on our website at academyofsciencestl.org. We have a second BioBlitz on Friday, September the 21st. We are hosting a BioBlitz in Tower Grove Park from noon until 8 p.m. And again, families and citizens of all ages are welcome to participate and join expedition teams in exploring the park's plant and animal life. There will be rain garden on grand tours included, and you'll have an opportunity to learn how to design your own backyard rain garden. You do need to register to attend that event as well. The registration information may not quite be up there on our website yet, so it should be up there within the next couple days. You can just keep checking back. And then I do want to mention also that if you are a birder and you have an interest in leading a birding team on for either of those BioBlitz expeditions, you can sign up on our website. So sign up for leaders for those expeditions is available on the website currently, or you can come see me after tonight's talk and provide me with your information, and we'll get in touch with you about that. One additional event on Thursday evening, September the 13th, 7 p.m., and in partnership with the St. Louis Science Center. And at the Science Center in the May Hall, we have Dr. Erica Miller with the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine and Tri-State Bird Rescue and Research, Inc. She'll be talking about wildlife rescue lessons from the Gulf oil spill. So we'll explore wildlife rehabilitation centers, long-term recovery of wildlife in the Gulf, and how Tri-State led a team of colleagues in creating emergency response during the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill. That event is also free and open to the public. Parking is free as well. You do need to register to attend, and you can do so by calling 314-533-8586 or by emailing events@academyofsciencestl.org. There is information on that particular talk up on our website currently. And as Elise mentioned, this is the first in our science seminar series. We're not quite finished scheduling the rest of those for this year, but we will probably have those up on our website within the next week or so. So again, take a look at our website, and if you're not an Academy member and you do want to receive information on our upcoming events, sign up on our e-news sign-up sheet. So with that said, I'm going to introduce tonight's speaker. Robert Gallardo. Robert grew up in California, where he was fond of the outdoors at an early age. He had a passion for butterfly collecting and family camping trips that instilled in him an abiding and lifelong interest in nature. He became fascinated with birds while attending Humboldt State University, and after attaining a degree in natural resource planning and interpretation, Robert arrived in Honduras in early 1993 as a Peace Corps volunteer, where he worked in Olancho and then the Rio Platano Biosphere Reserve. After his Peace Corps stint, he returned to Honduras to continue working and eventually became a self-taught naturalist, focusing on the country's butterflies, native orchids, and birds. He soon began leading birdwatching tours and in the process became Honduras' leading authority on its avifauna, having seen 90% of its birds and adding 30 country records. To date, he has produced 2 CDs on bird songs and native orchids and 2 regional bird guides. He is the co-founder and former VP of the Honduran Ornithological Association, and he is here with us tonight to talk about his work to promote avian conservation projects in Honduras and to share with us his stories from nearly 20 years of adventures exploring remote Honduran landscapes to document those 30 avian species never before recorded in this lush Central American country and mecca for migrating birds. He is at work with noted bird illustrator John Sill on a field guide to depict all the country's known species of birds, and he'll tell us more about that tonight and Birds Behind the Banana Republic, Avian Conservation in Honduras. So on behalf of the Zoo, the Academy of Science St. Louis, and the Missouri Conservation Heritage Foundation, who helped to bring Robert here this evening, won't you please join me in welcoming Robert Gallardo.
Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing? Wonderful. Welcome to this show. This is part of a 3-week, 8-state speaking tour. It started on the West Coast, over in Berkeley with Golden Gate Audubon. I've worked my way through the upper Midwest, up into the Northeast, down here to Missouri, then I finish up in Georgia. 7 of the 8 states on this tour I've never visited before. And so I've actually seen a number of life birds. My first one was the woodcock out in the Pine Barrens in New Jersey, and I've seen some other great birds. So tonight's presentation is going to consist of 2 parts. This first part is to get you in the mood of the Neotropics. So for those of you who have been to the Neotropics, you may recognize some of these things. for those who haven't, you might be inspired to go down and see some. So we want everybody to just sit back and relax, enjoy this first part of the show, and I don't talk at all in this first part. You get to listen to some music and see pictures. And then the second part, I go into more detail about Honduras, geography, cultural parts of the country, historical aspects as well, and national parks and birds that are found throughout the country. So without anything else to say for now, let's see these pictures. About there. Okay, there we go, there we go. So every single photograph was taken in the wild. The vast majority of those photos I've taken over the past 4 or 5 years. And interestingly enough, that jaguar and that tapir you saw and the tracks were all seen in the same morning. So there were tapir tracks and jaguar tracks all over our camp. You saw some of the photos from rafting down this river in eastern Honduras. We had these things, literally hundreds of tracks of tapirs and the jaguar there, and I photographed them. And so that morning we load everything into our rafts, start going down river, and at 11 o'clock we found the tapir sitting on the side of the river, just very relaxed, just resting in the shade. And as tapirs typically do as a defense, they jump into the river because their predators come from the land, jaguars, hunters, etc. And so we get to almost pet some of these tapirs. Just a couple minutes later, I'm in lead raft going down river, and there was a second raft that was just up behind us. The third raft was still having fun with a tapir. There's a jaguar right on the side of the river. And so I have a feeling that this jaguar was on he wanted to hunt that tapir. The tapir didn't know it. So I think if another 15, 20 minutes, we probably would have seen a massive struggle there. So how many people have ever been to Honduras? Let's see a show of hands. Great. So how many people have been to Costa Rica? Okay, that's pretty good. That's been pretty typical. Most people in the United States, especially bird watchers and nature lovers, they get down to Costa Rica first. Well, down in Honduras, we have other different sets of flora and fauna that are worth going to visit and see. So I'm going to show you some other aspects of the country here. You can see Central America, and Honduras is located right almost in the middle. You can see the pointer there. There's Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. And way down at the bottom is the Darien Gap with Colombia. Nicaragua is the largest country in Central America. Honduras is the second largest. How big is Honduras? It's about 44,000 square miles, roughly the size of Tennessee, and almost has kind of the shape of Tennessee, except for this little piece way down in the south. Honduras is divided up into what we call departments. There are 18 departments of various sizes. The largest one, if you look at that big block of yellow there, that's the Department of Olancho, and it's about as big as the whole country of El Salvador. Another place that Honduras is known for are the Bay Islands way up in the north, and that's a separate department. And these islands offer some of the best snorkeling and diving in all of Central America, along with Belize. Honduras is about 300 miles across, maybe about 130 miles from the Caribbean coast down to the Pacific. And Honduras gets crunched off in the south by El Salvador and Nicaragua. You can see there's about 8 million inhabitants. That's fairly low by Central American standards. Guatemala has several million more. El Salvador, even though it's very, very small, has several million more people. So the farther going from west to east, the farther direction you go, the less inhabited it is. And there are parts of the country in the east that are very, very remote, and very, very few people live out there. And you can, if you wanted to, you could walk for days and days and not see anybody out there. So you can see from the map, Honduras is very, very rugged, very, very mountainous. It has been crunched by tectonic plates for millions of years. And unlike countries to the south of us, like Costa Rica and Panama, that tend to have a central mountain range that neatly divides the Caribbean from the Pacific, Honduras is not like that. It has mountain ranges you can see that run diagonally, horizontally, and almost every single direction imaginable. And then in western Honduras, we have this huge area that is almost entirely mountainous with small intermountain valleys. And this is all really connected into Guatemala and onward up into southern Mexico. This is why it's so mountainous. This is a present day illustration of all the plates, all the North American plate, South American plate, Pacific plate. And so Honduras has been crunched over millions of years. About 165 million years ago, this block that says CB, this was way out here in the ocean, and then it got pushed into its present day position to bridge the gap and form this isthmus, which we call Central America. Honduras in historic times had many different indigenous groups. The Mayans were the most famous in this area, and the Mayans reached their peak, at least in Honduras, around the 5th and 9th century AD, and they ended their southern range, I guess we can say, in western Honduras, and then all the way up into the Guatemala and into Yucatan. This is from Copan ruins, one of the most famous the Mayan sites in the Mayan world. Tikal they liken to the New York of the Mayan world because of the very, very tall pyramids that are still standing today. Copan ruins is known as the Paris of the Mayan world. It has the most extensive and the largest amount of carved stone glyphs that have survived over these hundreds and hundreds of years. And this is one of the ball courts here, and it's hard to see from this photo, but this little ball court has 6 stone carvings, which are the heads of macaws. These people worship the Quetzal, resplendent Quetzal, and the scarlet macaws. Scarlet macaws do not exist there in the wild anymore. This tarp here, you can see, is actually covering the largest hieroglyphic stairway in the Mayan kingdom. It consisted of several hundred pieces of carved glyphs that actually told the whole history of this site. And when the Mayans abandoned there, all these pieces came tumbling down over the centuries due to erosion. And epigraphers and other archaeologists are slowly but surely piecing this back together so they can actually read the whole history. Also, on the same site, there's a big sculpture museum in there with replicas and other original pieces. And this is a replica of the Rosalila Temple. It's a life-size replica. You can see that's about a 6-foot door. Archaeologists, when they were digging tunnels through one of the many temples that are there, just to find what was inside these temples, they ran into the wall of this. And much of the structure still had some of the original green and red coloration on it. And naturally, inside there was buried one of the most famous of the Mayan rulers. There were many other indigenous groups in the country, some of which exist today, but in very, very low numbers. And then we had a group in eastern Honduras where you saw the photo where you actually rafted down through the rainforest. And the last day we come upon this big glyph right here. So this is facing downriver. This is about 7 feet across, this glyph. And nobody knows who did it or when they did it. These were people that literally disappeared. And just recently in the news, they apparently discovered the long-lost White City, and it was very, very close to this rock. It's in a valley just over another hillside. And I personally think that this is a map of their kingdom. Archaeologists, present-day archaeologists who are trained in Mayan thinking have a much different point of view on this, and they think this is a double-headed crocodile. And if you look upriver and look at all the other glyphs that are found along the river, you can see a head of a curacao, a sun, some faces. They didn't worship all these deities and gods like the Mayans did. So these were much more simple. And then came the Spanish. The British were in Honduras for a while too. They were trying to fight over resources, especially lumber. But the Spanish eventually got the stronghold in Central America. They built several forts. This is one of the forts. And then they left many churches. There are colonial Spanish churches all over the countryside, especially in western Honduras, where they really had a stronghold early on. This city, for example, in western Honduras has 3 old churches, very few of which have remained intact in the condition in which they were made. Most of them have been restored to some extent. On to the D.C., Washington, D.C. of Honduras. This is Tegucigalpa, the capital. It has about 1 million people, and it's located toward the southern part of the country. You look way in the back, you can see that monstrous church back there. That's an old church as well. Here you can see a typical town, a little city along the Caribbean coast. Very, very Caribbean feeling, the palm trees, the beaches, and a tourist destination. And as I mentioned, in western Honduras especially, you have all different sizes of intermountain valleys. And this is a really good example. So you can see a very little valley here and a big church right there in the middle. I don't know if you can see from there, but can you see all these trees here? They're like 3 main groups of trees. Anybody have a wild guess as to what they are? Yes, there are pines. There are pines there. Honduras has 7 species of native pines, and pines in their northern range in northern Nicaragua. And then there's a swath of sweet gum that's found there, and then oaks. As you go out in the countryside farther, you see more typical homes. This is a typical adobe mud home glued together with mud, typical Spanish tile roof. And then here you can see where they have a lime whitewash on top of the walls. These are homes that existed in western Honduras with these wooden slats, very put together really loosely, and these grass thatch roofs. You can no longer find these in Honduras. They're gone. These people were the Maya Chorti, the descendants of the Mayans in the west. And if you look in the back, there's a cinder block house being built. The local government funded the construction of these houses to try to improve the people's lives and to try to get rid of some of the Chagas disease from a kissing bug, which is lethal. And so those types of houses are all gone now. And these are very typical houses in the Caribbean, and especially along major rivers. And most of these rivers flood every year. So you can see this is a pretty big distance between the river and the bank. But each year, the river like this, and this is in eastern Honduras, this will flood. And this will just slowly pass right underneath these houses. And in most cases, those houses are going to be intact after the water levels drop down. And then this provides a better airflow underneath the house as well. I'm going to show a few pictures of some of the things people do in the countryside. This is something you see in eastern Honduras at certain times of the year. You can see this is a dugout canoe here made from one solid log. It might be maybe 10 feet long. And I think there's 3 people in there, and they're balancing in this little canoe, throwing these seine nets out without falling into the water. And he's trying to catch some shrimp. Another thing that you'll almost never see are these oxen that are working. So they're working and turning this press here, and this guy is feeding raw sugar cane into this thing, squeezing out the sugar cane juices, and then it goes into a bucket, and then they process it to get raw sugar. Coffee. I imagine a lot of people here drink coffee. Shade coffee, if you're going to buy coffee, buy certified shade coffee. It is very, very good for the birds. There have been a number of scientific studies done, and my personal observations that show there's on average of about 150 bird species that you can find in a shade coffee plantation. So what's a shade coffee plantation? These are all trees growing over the coffee. Where they grow sun coffee, they completely clear out all the forest, every single tree, all shrubs and everything, and all there is coffee. And so you have to have high input of chemicals, fertilizers, and other pesticides. These are leguminous trees. These are nitrogen fixating trees. Yes? Okay, so you're asking if they have to move coffee plantations or replant beyond where they planted before? Yes, this shade coffee is the most sustainable coffee you can grow. There's organic coffee, which actually destroys at least twice the amount of rainforest than semi-organic shade coffee. So organic coffee, you need twice the amount of plants to produce the same amount of coffee. So it's one of these double-edged swords where the consumers have to make a decision. You want semi-organic shade coffee like this, where they put the coffee pulp on and maybe a little bit of chemical fertilizers, or you want to lose twice the amount of rainforest. When coffee prices go up, there's net loss of rainforest because people all rush out to clear the forest and to plant more coffee. So this kind of shade coffee plantation is highly sustainable because these trees are holding the soil in place from all the heavy tropical rains. Well, there are many places that grow certified shade coffee, like Rainforest Alliance is one of the several organizations that actually certifies coffee plantation in Central America. There's an ongoing Smithsonian project right now that are actually starting to certify bird-friendly shade coffee plantations. And so they're going into they're starting in Nicaragua. And so they're going into places where the farmer, and this is the owner of this farm, he has to have a certain composition or diversity of tree species, which is going to increase the diversity of birds that you have in your area. And so we're trying to get those people to come into Honduras because traditionally most of the Honduras coffee is shade. And so and this farmer has gone even beyond that. Hard to see because of the clouds. We're up at 4,500 feet. There's a natural forest reserve up here. And so this is mid-elevation rainforest. And so he gets all kinds of birds that come out of the rainforest to feed on insects in the coffee plantation, as well as hummingbirds. A lot of these trees here, these are legumes, and they produce like a little bottle brush type flower that draws in hummingbirds and other bird species. And in a place like this, it's managed well. There are not many chemicals. This can be loaded with Wilson's warblers. This can have some hooded warblers, which is almost a little high, and you can get wood thrushes in here and other native species. So coffee processing, everybody gets into it, the little kids, the parents, sometimes the grandparents. And so their school year is evolved around the coffee harvest season, which starts around October, it goes into January or February. This was probably the last picking of the season. You can see a lot of green beans in red, where they completely strip the plants of all berries, and that will help stimulate them to bloom. There's the green beans that produces, I don't know what they do with those, very bitter coffee. They do grow potatoes down in southwestern Honduras in the highlands. You can see rows of potatoes here. And here in the back, you can see cloud forest. So down here we can get some open field birds, rufous-collared sparrow, rufous-collared robin, maybe a few hummingbirds on the edge, and right in here you can get quetzals. So you got potatoes and quetzals. Honduras also exports a large amount of pineapple. They have the largest fields in Central America. This is just a tiny snippet of what is there on the north coast. In the back you can see the Caribbean Sea. And from where I'm standing, there's a huge national park behind me. And we'll get to that in a minute. And then African palm, it is growing and continues to grow throughout Honduras and the whole region. This is one of the major threats to biodiversity in the region. And they use it to produce oil and lard that people eat. And then they also export it for commercial products and including cosmetics. And there are actually environmentally friendly cosmetics out there if you look hard enough. So I'm going to show you some of the protected areas in the country. Honduras has a wonderful protected area system. Unfortunately, a lot of it's on paper. The government is not totally inept at protecting these areas, but like elsewhere in developing countries, they have huge budgetary problems. And so they're unable to hire and train skilled personnel to be able to effectively protect a lot of these reserves. But at least on paper, we have over 100 reserves, over 8 million acres, that covers about 27% of the territory. Just as a reference, Honduras is twice the size of Costa Rica. This block of reserve here, that is as big as all of Costa Rica's parks combined. So just this one little piece right here, the Rio Platano Biosphere Reserve, that's 2 million acres. That's as big as Yellowstone. So this area here, coming down to this green area, and into northeastern Nicaragua, this is called La Mosquitia. And if you ever read the book, seen the movie, The Mosquito Coast, this is where it takes place. This is where Harrison Ford loses his mind making ice in the jungle. That was actually filmed in Belize, not in Honduras. So this is the largest wilderness in Central America. This is bigger than the Petén region in Guatemala, northern Guatemala. And this area here, this is the northern range limit for many species of flora and fauna. So you saw the picture of the tapir there, the jaguar, the scarlet macaw. There's giant anteaters here, harpy eagle, crested eagle. The list goes on and on and on. This is one of the most incredibly diverse areas left in Central America. It also makes for one of the most difficult areas to work in because it is so remote. You have to fly into most of these places, and then you have to take boats all over. These are big lagoons, circling one here. There's another one. These are brackish water lagoons, and they're massive mangrove estuaries here. And then this one, this lagoon is 50 miles long. And even if you're standing on the short end, there's a fairly good-sized town here, you can barely see the other side. It is a massive lagoon, and it's connected to a bunch of other lagoons. This area here that's in white, that is pine grass savanna. We'll show you that in a second. So here's the Rio Platano Reserve. If you remember from the very first slide, that was up there for at least 20, 30 minutes, there's a big rock monolith. I'm standing at the base of this rock monolith up on a ridge. And here I'm looking northeast toward the Caribbean. If you're standing on that other ridge up there, you'd be looking at the Caribbean and some of those coastal lagoons. This is all virgin rainforest. And again, this is this maroon area here, just part of it. And black and white hawk eagle, very scarce bird of prey, found in Central and South America. This is a bird that we get on almost every single trip out there. And the macaw is standing in the same spot, but looking southward is rainforest as far as you can see. And you'd almost think you're in the middle of the Amazon basin looking at a place like this, but this is eastern Honduras. And then we have the macaws there. The Great Green Macaw ends its northern range in eastern Honduras. And if you go online, look at websites, BirdLife International and others, they're going to say that this bird is like not even in eastern Honduras or almost extinct, locally extinct. I've rafted the entire length of the river 5 times. On 4 of the 5 trips, I've counted more Great Green Macaws than scarlets. So we have probably one of the largest populations of all in eastern Honduras. Again, here's the peak. So I was taking the picture right there, right at the base. And there's a crested eagle. That was an aerial photograph taken in the area several years ago. So the crested eagles and harpy eagles, these are birds that get hunted by people, sometimes just out of spite, or sometimes they see it as a threat to animals like the chickens that they have. And unfortunately, they do get shot. Here's the same reserve in the core zone, and if you look right there, you can see a little piece of the raft, just to give you an idea of how big these boulders are. So there are a few people here that actually did this trip with me in 2010. This is one of the most remote areas in Central America. This is the only place where you can raft. It's about 70 miles rafting through virgin rainforest where there are no human settlements. Although we saw fishermen that were there catching fish, they're there just temporarily, and then they take the fish back to market. And that only happens once a year. And we have this tiger heron another one that ends its northern range in eastern Honduras. And that white area I showed you on the map are these vast pine savannas. There's a lot of Caribbean pine there. And this kind of looks like your Everglades down in Florida. A lot of grass. This is kind of dry. There are wet areas and palm trees. Some very special birds there. We have breeding populations of vermilion flycatcher and these black-throated bobwhites. You can only see those in eastern Honduras and the Yucatan Peninsula. And then Pico Bonito National Park, that picture I showed you of the pineapple fields, this is the park behind it. And so if we look up in the map there, it's this big block of green right along the north coast. And this park is only part of this mountain chain that runs for almost 200 miles. This park has forest cover, rainforest, from sea level all the way to 8,000 feet of contiguous forest cover. There are almost no other places in Central America where you can find parks like this. Usually there's people in there, they cut out areas to farm and have cattle, but not this park. So sometimes, and quite often in the rainy season when it's really cold up high, they can push many cloud forest birds right down to sea level, and even quetzals. We see those things that low. Black and white owl we find there, and lovely Cotinga. Honduras is right at the center of the range of this wonderful bird, this electric blue bird, purple chest and a purple throat. And so this is a real common bird there. Another shot looking up into the park. You can see this wonderful owl that you can find throughout much of the Neotropics. And this quail. This is a quail that a lot of birders don't get to see because it's very rare in Costa Rica. We find these things in Pico Bonito and in eastern Honduras. Honduras set up its park system in 1987 with the original set of parks, and this system was set up to protect cloud forest, mostly to supply drinking water for all the inhabitants that live at the base of all these mountains. Unfortunately, they protected these parks by drawing a lot of lines on contour maps that were from 1,800 meters up, so that's close to like 6,000 feet and up. In the case of most of these parks, the forest cover goes way down below 1,800 meters. In the case of Pico Bonito, you saw the forest cover goes all the way to sea level. So many of these parks have been adopted by many grassroots organizations that are trying to protect these mountains and their water sources, and many of them are continuing to try to legally, or to get the government to lower down the legal limits of these national parks to where the forest cover really exists. This is a wonderful park. If you look down at the map, down here in the west, there's a big round green area. That's Celaque National Park, one of our beautiful cloud forest reserves. And if you look here, you can see all these trees here. These are pines. Pines, 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 and up top, cloud forest. These areas are extremely, extremely important for the big populations of the wood warblers that come down from North America. In a place like this, you can get East Coast and West Coast warblers all coming together and co-inhabiting these forests with the resident birds. And many of them stay there as long as 7 or 8 months. Getting up higher in the mountain, this is cloud forest, and these are oaks. Almost all of these are oak trees. We have a wonderful motmot there called the blue-throated motmot that ranges from Chiapas down to western Honduras. And then quetzals. Everywhere we go in Honduras, there are quetzals. Almost all these high mountains with forest have them. I would almost safely say that we probably have more than Guatemala and Costa Rica combined. We have an enormous amount of quetzals, and there are several places where they're fairly easy to see. And this is the very top of the mountain. This is the highest mountain in Honduras at about 9,000 feet. And we got this wonderful little wren. Kind of looks like a house wren, and they're closely related. Here's another wonderful park. If you look down here at the map, there's this big green block. This is actually 2 national parks with a big freshwater lake in the middle. We'll see that in a minute. This park has mid-elevation rainforest, and it goes up into cloud forest. Quetzals here too. And then we have this little Motmot. This is the smallest Motmot species in existence. Going up higher into the same park, you get up into submontane forest, which is almost cloud forest conditions, and you get this beautiful chlorophonia. Here's another national park. It's mostly cloud forest. If you look down at the map, it is this green area here. This is the capital's drinking water supply. So this is the area that they're really interested in. They get more than 50% of their water from. So the capital is on the other side of this mountain and way down in the slope in the valley. But there are wonderful birds there too. There's a pretty good trail system. So we get this euphonia there. This is a beautiful male. And this hummingbird, this is the female. It's about 2¼ inches long, tiny, tiny little guy. So just a little bit bigger than the smallest hummingbird in the world. We were looking for the male on this trip. The male has a metallic blue throat and a really long black and white checkered tail. Same national park, up high again into the cloud forest, and again these are oak trees, all these real big ones. And if you look on there, there's almost every type of imaginable epiphyte growing on tops of these branches, and those support whole communities of life, of insects and other arthropods. We have a black thrush there, I think it's now black robin, and the wine-throated hummingbird, the gorgeous male here. Another reserve, if you look at the map right here along the north coast, this is a mangrove wetland. There are 3 species of mangroves all throughout here. You can see there's the Caribbean Sea. So you can get into this reserve, you take a train, then you take boat rides up into some of these canals. There are a couple species of monkeys, crocodiles, caimans, there are manatee here if you're lucky, but they tend to be off in another part of the reserve. And this beautiful heron, the agami heron, considered by many to be the most beautiful heron in the world. This is the same reserve, but deeper inside the mangroves. And here's a bird called the sun grebe. It's not a true grebe. It's in what's called the finfoot family. I think there are about 3 species found in the world. Another area is, this is a species management area for our only known endemic, which is an endemic hummingbird. This mountain you're looking at in the back, that is Pico Bonito. So we're looking northward. On the other side of that is that incredible rainforest and the Caribbean Sea. What do you think these are here coming out from behind the sign? Anybody? Yep, these are Oregon pipe cacti. There are a number of species of endemic cacti and other succulents that have been found here, along with the endemic Honduran Emerald. This is a rain shadow valley. The north side of the face can get up to about 9 feet of rain a year. It is incredibly, incredibly wet. So you can imagine this mountain going from sea level to over 8,000 feet. Tropical storm comes off the Caribbean and hits that. All that rain goes right down onto the north face. And on this side of the mountain, the south face, in the rain shadow, you're lucky if you get 1.5 feet of rain, most likely 1 foot. And so there are some places, if you could beam somebody from here down to this habitat, they're going to say, what am I doing in Arizona? This is not Arizona. This is Central America. So this is tropical, dry scrub forest. When I was in the Pine Barrens, I was with somebody who really knew the plants, and he pointed out a tree called an ironwood. Well, this is our ironwood here. This is really hard. You cannot even swing a machete into this tree. This tree, for example, as small as it is, it could be almost 100 years old. And there are houses that are in the countryside that have logs, beams buried inside the adobe, and those termites cannot penetrate this wood. And there's some of these houses that have wood in there for almost 100 years, still intact. So this is our only known endemic bird. It's an endangered species. The Honduran Emerald, now found in at least 5 or 6 different parts of the country. And this is pristine habitat. Although it looks really, really rugged and dry, this is where it thrives, and it feeds on prickly pear cacti flower, and it also feeds on the flowers of bromeliads. So there's actually an incredible diversity and quantity of bromeliads in areas that have not been disturbed. And if you look closer, you can see all these kind of little stringy things coming up here. That's actually a euphorbia. Produces a little pinkish flower that this emerald really loves. Many other great birds there, including this little ground cuckoo with its Cleopatra makeup around its eye. This is a bird that just skulks in the understory, feeding on arthropods. Another area that a number of us have been working on is the Ocellated Quail Conservation Area. To show you on the map here, this is up in northwest Olancho. You can see mountains, 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 mountains everywhere we go. All these hills behind here, this is a wildlife refuge. This is one of the most incredible birding areas in Honduras, outside of La Mosquitia, where we can find lowland, mid-elevation, and cloud forest species all in one spot. And then the added bonus for this site is this guy. How many people here have seen an ocellated quail in the wild? Nope. I could tour this country probably for 5 years and maybe see one hand. That is how hard this bird is to find. This bird has a very limited range distribution from southern Mexico in the highlands and pine oak forest, that's where this guy lives, down through Guatemala and throughout most of Honduras. It is disappearing throughout much of its range, mostly from change and destruction of habitat. But several years ago, I found a place in Honduras where there's a big population of these birds. So we've been undergoing field studies to see actually how many are in there. And this is a bird that feeds on the roots and tubers of a wide variety of plants. And so we don't even have to see this bird to know it exists. We'll go into an area and find these holes, maybe they're an inch, inch and a half across, sometimes a couple inches deep. And we know if there's hundreds and hundreds of holes, we know that's a covey of maybe 8 or 10 birds. And so, but we found a lot of birds during our ground surveys. And that's when I was able to get the very first photo of a female in the wild. And then I got these 2 photos of 2 different males. This is very closely related to the Montezuma quail that you have in the southern U.S. that extends deep down into Mexico. Most people still believe that this is a separate species, ocellated from the Montezuma. We hope in the future, after we formalize the reserve and get a government decree to protect it, working alongside with community members, that we want to get a team of scientists in there. Nobody knows anything about that bird, almost nothing. The whole biology, its life cycle, if they move up and down the mountain, etc. So this bird literally is worth its weight in gold. This is harder for people to get this bird than it is a Harpy Eagle. Also found in that reserve is the red-throated caracara. It's another bird that's almost disappeared from much of its range in Central America, and in most cases people don't know why. I finally got to see this thing this year. It took me 19 years to cross paths with them. In that reserve also you can see it's pine forest, wood warblers, and migrants from throughout North America concentrate here. And we have somebody helping us document some of those birds. Again, pine oak forest, all these entire mountains, migrant wood warblers throughout this whole area. And so this is down in the southwest. If you look at the map, there's a kind of a green area there. On top of this hill, we can look down into El Salvador. And wonderful cloud forest birds up there. You can drive up to Quetzal. One year we came up upon 3 quetzals eating ripe blackberries on the side of the road, their tails touching the ground. Don't see that every day. And then we got this fulvous owl there, looks very similar to your barred owl. Again, pine oak forest. Everywhere you go where there's not broadleaf forest of some kind, you get pine oak, and then these jays, bushy crested jays, probably living in Honduras by the hundreds of thousands. Very common bird there. More pine oak. This is very dry pine forest. This is what I call the pine barrens. The pine barrens I saw in New Jersey didn't look anything like this. There's incredibly diverse habitat down in those pine barrens. This area is not. This is very, very dry. And we have the Mexican whippoorwill found throughout the highlands as well. Lake Yojoa, this is where I live. And again, we're looking at that same block that consists of 2 national parks and this big freshwater lake in the middle. And this is Miamba National Park on the east side. Here there are snail kites, probably one of the largest populations in the whole region. This bird is still very, very common there. And we're trying to look for somebody in some groups to come down and do a formal population census on this bird. A number of years ago, I had witnessed these birds declining, and we just don't know why, probably fluctuating water levels, but they seem to be coming back really well. But we need to document how many birds that we actually have out there. Extensive and massive wetlands all along many parts of the shore. Here we're looking at, this is part of Santa Barbara National Park, the southern end, and there's cloud forest and quetzals up there too. In Honduras we have 11 species of crakes, rails, and gallinules. 8 of the 11 are found in these marshes. And they're not just all scattered randomly in these marshes. If you really get down and look, there are actually these little micro niches in these wetlands. So starting from the shoreline where there's tall grass on solid ground, you'll get a species. You go out a little farther, you'll get another species. Out farther, another one, until you finally get into this completely floating vegetation where you can still get yet another species of crake. Ruddy crake are crawling around there like mice. They're very common. Spotted rail is only known from Lake Yojoa in Honduras. That's another difficult bird to find and within its range distribution. In the Bay Islands, if you look here, all these big blue areas, these are marine reserves, and they consist of about 217,000 acres. And there are some Yucatan birds there as well. The Yucatan vireo is found on most of the islands. Yucatan woodpecker, you find it on one of our islands, and then you see it again in the Yucatan Peninsula. And then finally in southern Honduras, way down here, it's maybe only about 70 miles of actual shoreline. This area, much of the area is included under the Ramsar Convention, and there are massive wetlands here, consisting of mangroves, seasonal wetlands, and other permanent wetlands. And you can see here this extinct cinder cone. Here this is part of the ring of fire along the Pacific. There are no active volcanoes in Honduras. We have huge concentrations of waterfowl down there, which include regional birds that move regionally into the area, resident birds, and then many thousands of shorebirds from North America, and ducks. Another shot in a different part of the area, Jabiru storks. Sometimes we can see several in one day. This is a young bird here. And then we got this bird here that they're still calling yellow warbler. This is a resident bird, and he's got a really bright reddish head. Another shot in another part of that whole region. We get pinnated bittern there. And then clapper rail. This is one of the birds that I discovered several years ago along with a Honduran biologist. So I've been down there working and living for 20 years. I've been working as a professional tour guide for almost 13 years. Many years ago, I bought this audio recording equipment. This was the same piece of equipment that Robert Ridgely uses. I work on and off with him. This is actually a cassette recorder and something that I still use. Digital equipment does not hold up in the tropics if you live there. And if it breaks down, it is just so expensive to repair. Unlike the cassette recorder, that's mostly mechanical. So I took about 5 years to record birds throughout the entire country. Eastern Honduras, the rainforest, throughout the mountains, the cloud forest all over the country. And then I produced a CD, Bird Sounds of Honduras. I also have produced a couple small regional field guides, illustrated field guides, for a couple different areas. And then there are bird counts, Christmas bird counts, just like you have here. And then I'm continuing to train local guides. In a very short period of time, I will be starting a third guide training course where we're trying to fine-tune some of the guides that have been trained already on how to write itineraries, budgets, and how to create your own market contacts. So many things going on down in Honduras. Last year I was able to attend the Midwest Birding Symposium up in Ohio. I flew my mom out from California. She's been to Honduras many times. She's actually done the river rafting trip with us a couple of years ago. While she manned or womaned the table, I went around and visited other people, and I got to meet John Sill. And he had a booth in a separate auditorium, and he was selling his artwork there. And the first thing that caught my eye was a painting of a snow-capped hummingbird. This is a tiny hummingbird that's maroon colored with a white cap. It's a spectacular little hummingbird that only reaches eastern Honduras. And he had this thing in flight feeding on a little verbena flower. I took a closer look at it, and I said to myself, I think this guy could paint the birds for my book. So we talked over the next 2 or 3 days, tossing around ideas about doing the field guide together, me authoring the book, him being the sole artist for the book. And so we agreed to do it. And our goal is to illustrate all the birds of Honduras, 750 species that we have there, and about 1,020 illustrations that he has to paint. And these are going to be depicted on 74 plates. The ultimate goal is to not only produce an English edition, but a simultaneous Spanish edition. So a Spanish book will be much needed in the country to help promote avian conservation with the nationals, the biologists that live there, other nonprofit organizations, and other projects that come into the country. The downside is that we could not get a publisher. The publishers that work in the region, which are very few, on field guides, are already tied up in other projects. And rather than abandoning the project altogether, we have decided to move forward with this. I have spent almost the entire year writing the book in between other projects, and I'm well into the species accounts right now. John is painting the original color plates, and I'm going to hook up with him in Georgia in about a week to see what he's done. So we need to fundraise about $125,000 to do about 4,500 books, English and Spanish edition. So part of the reason why I'm up here in the States is to look for support for this book. And Honduras is one of the larger countries in Central America, with Nicaragua and Guatemala. None of the countries have their own field guide. And because of our unique avifauna composition that we have there, we really need our own book. This will stimulate conservation projects. This will get more people to go down there birding. This will stimulate jobs for the guides that we're training. And so we're hoping that these books are going to have a snowball effect on a lot of this stuff that we've been working on for years and years. So at the end of this presentation, I've got a number of handouts here which talk about most of this stuff. If people are interested in donating toward the field guide, there is a tax-deductible option that people can do that here in the U.S. And one of the organizations that I've been working with here in Missouri for some time have set up a special account for that, and they have agreed to match the funds that go into that account. It's up to $15,000, and I think we're already up to $6,000. So we're getting close already. So if we can get $15,000 in their account, they're going to match that with $15,000. And I already have about $25,000 fundraised from other efforts. So we're on a really good pace to publishing both of these books. One of the things I've been doing is selling John's artwork. Even though they are not finished, there are many art collectors out there, many people who know his work. He's worked on a number of field guides, and they're buying up some of the flashiest plates or the flashiest birds, but there are still many available. If you really want something out of helping us there, you can go on a tour. They have a number of tours set up for next year. Eagle Eye tours out of Canada, Naturalist Journeys out of Arizona. I have a couple spaces left on a couple of my Rio Platino rafting trips. And then, as I said, I've worked in conjunction with Robert Ridgely for a number of years. He's wanted to support me on the speaking tour and the book project. And so I said, well, let's set up a joint tour in Honduras. So we're going to do a Robert tour next year. This is almost a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So this is a 13-day tour that I got set up in June, and he's never seen ocellated quail. This is Mr. Neotropical ornithologist, and he's never seen that bird. So he's really psyched to get back down there. And I think there's already 5 or 6 spots already reserved, starting from the west coast to here. I've been getting emails, and that trip is going to fill up. And all this information is down here. And there are other ways that if you're really enthused, you can help me out on this worthwhile project. So are there any other questions? So you said there's a Green Mountain Coffee website? Oh, wonderful. Okay, so look for Green Mountain website for eco-friendly coffee. It's Spanish. And some touristy places, hotels, especially along the north coast, it's English. And one thing I forgot to mention about Honduras, since it's been kind of one of the backwater countries of Central America, and it's got so many parks and reserves, I have been guiding for nearly 13 years and have never run into another birding group in the field. Never in 13 years. And so there are not many places where you can go to, especially in Central America, especially Costa Rica, where guides can actually claim that. And sometimes we get kind of spoiled down there. We have a whole national park to ourselves, and we get all these great birds to ourselves. Even if we ran 20 groups at the same time, we probably still wouldn't run into another group in the field. There are just so many places to go down there. Any other questions? Well, great. Oh, one other question. So there's only one real wilderness trip, and that's the rafting trip in eastern Honduras, where there's a lot of tent camping. The last night's at the luxurious lodge at Pico Bonito. But all the other tours, we're riding in a coaster, which is a stand-up bus. Everybody gets their own wide seat, and we're usually in a hotel or a lodge type facility for several days, bird around that region. Then we'll move to another site, do the same thing, et cetera, et cetera. Most tours last from about 8 to 10 days. Weather is highly variable depending on where you go in the country and what time of year. Any other questions? In the case with Robert Ridgely and I, we're taking 12 people. When I guide myself, it's usually 8 to 10. So we keep very small groups. Some places where we're birding inside rainforest along trails, it's very difficult. It's usually the first 3 people that get to see some of these birds. I use audio playback equipment for many of these birds that are real skittish and that are deep in the rainforest, but we rotate people from back to front. Any other questions? I'd like to thank all the organizers who've helped put this together. This is a wonderful experience and a great opportunity for me to come up here and speak in front of so many enthusiastic people. And we hope to see some of you down there someday. And again, if you feel free to come up here and take some of these sheets if you want, or a business card, and we can talk some more. I do. Thank you for reminding me. So over here on my left, there is a sign-up sheet for those of you who want to be put on a personal mailing list of mine, I continually send out wonderful bird photographs that I shoot. Almost all those bird photographs there are mine, and they're Digiscope photos, so I get incredible photos, and I share them with everybody. So we want people to see what's down there. And I will also be sending out emails on the progress of the book on my personal bird website, which is Birds of Honduras, just like a book. There's actually a thermometer down there where it's showing increments of where this the book project is going. So when I get back, that's got to get raised up really, really quick. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you for coming to the show.